As a way of centering us in our time today, I want to share with you the first 11 verses from Psalms 37. Do not fret because of the wicked. Do not be envious of wrongdoers, for they so soon fade like the grass and wither like green herbs. Trust in the Lord and do good, so you will live in the land and enjoy security. Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in him, and he will act. He will make your vindication shine like the light, and the justice of your cause like the noonday. Be still before the Lord, and wait patiently for him. Do not fret over those who prosper in their way, over those who carry out evil devices. Refrain from anger and forsake wrath. Do not fret, it leads only to evil. For the wicked shall be cut off, but those who wait for the Lord shall inherit the land. Yet a little while, and the wicked will be no more. Though you diligently for their place, they will not be there. But the meek shall inherit the land and delight themselves in abundant prosperity. Amen. I want to welcome you to Hobson UMC on YouTube. I am VHD Jr. I am the lead pastor here at Hobson, and I'm in for my weekly conversation with my son, Trey. It gives me an opportunity to kind of work through where I might be going for this coming Sunday, which is the 6th, 7th, Sunday after Epiphany. We generally don't get down this far in year C because of the way the Easter falls, but Easter is coming at the very end of the time that it normally would appear, and so we started this a couple of years ago as because of COVID, and we have continued it. It gives me an opportunity to check in with him and to have him and the discussion kind of give me some additional context to be able to work with for Sunday to kind of see where people are. And it's an opportunity just to be able to connect with some people who don't normally get to come and visit with us, and some of our members like Crystal Doss, who just likes the convenience of listening at home. But whatever your reason, we're thankful, and we truly appreciate when you let us know that there was something that we said during the conversation that at a moment brought you some comfort when you needed that, or something that might have challenged you to look at the word in a different way. And so thank you. And I wanted to thank those of you who support the recording, and those of you who support the ministry here at Hobson, particularly with your financial gifts. And so it's an opportunity just to be able to say how deeply grateful I am for you. And just thank you for tuning in today. Whenever we gather at Hobson, we spend some time in sharing with one another those joys and concerns that we have, things that we want to give God thanks for what God has been doing in our lives, and for those things of which we know that we need God's help and to enable us just to be able to make it through it. And we share it with one another because we believe it's important for us as a community of believers for us to be in prayer for one another and to share in the journey. Because not only in our time of prayer are we lifting it up to God, we're also saying that we want to be used by God in whatever ways God sees that we can be of use to those within our community. So prayer is very important to us, and it's important, and we appreciate when you let us know that there are things that you want us to pray for. One of the special times in our prayer time is when we share those birthday celebrations that we have for the week. If we don't do anything else, and if the message is not what we want the message to be, then we can always give thanks that we were able to celebrate what God has done and how God has blessed those with another 365 days. This week in our celebration, and I want to lift up a dear friend and a colleague, Reverend Harriet Bryan, another dear friend, Carla Tina Hampton, Renita Perkins, Wilma Harris, Stacy Campbell, a good friend of Sonia's, Philip Stockland, Vanessa Jordan, Brian Barnett, Debbie Miller, Vanessa Jordan, Linda Singh, Lataska Nelson, and Matthew Clemens Mitchell. He's over at Metropolitan, but I always enjoy getting to hang out with him. And Carl Jones. Not only are we doing a birthday celebration for Carl, but we are also praying for him. He's had some health issues the last month or so, but we're lifting him up. Pat Hodges Abel, Selena Spivey, Vivian Smith, and John Sneed. So if you know these people, send them a shout out this week and let them know that you too are thinking about them. I want to ask for prayers for the family and friends of Roberta Verbal, whose life they celebrated on 2 days ago when this recording will come out, and just continue to keep them in prayers. Also ask for prayers for the family and friends and the numerous students that Paul Bass, and knowing that he will be deeply missed, but we are asking for prayers for them. As we're celebrating, birthdays and events that are coming up, I want to ask for prayers for Robin Dunlap. This week, she will be remembering her husband on the anniversary of his death, King Dunlap, and also ask for prayers for the family and friends of Michael Clayton Davis, Jr., whose anniversary of his death is also this week. So keep those two families in prayer. And then I ask for prayers for Lisa Borkins, who will be having a surgery this coming week. And in fact, she will be having it on the anniversary of her grandfather, whom she was very close to, of his death. And so just lift her up in prayers this week, and as she goes in to get some corrective surgery done for her. As I say, if you have a special prayer request that you want me to lift up, or if you just have prayers and just say, "Hey, look, Sonny, I don't necessarily want it to be broadcast, but I do want you to be in prayer," let me know. You can send them to me via Facebook, or you can text message me. You can call me, however it is, because we believe in this place and in this ministry. We believe in the power of prayer, and we want to share those moments with you, both the celebrations and the concerns that you may have. This week, which will be the 7th week after the Epiphany, we will continue with Luke's Sermon on the Plain, and I'll be reading for you verses in the 6th chapter of Luke, verses 27 through 38. And I'll be using the New Revised Standard Version today. And Jesus said, "But I say to you, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other side also. And for anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you, and if you take away your goods, do not ask for them again. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is to you? For even sinners do the same. If you lend to those whom you hope to receive, what credit is that to you? For even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much again. But love your enemies, do good, and lend, expecting nothing in return. Your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High. For he is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For the measure you give will be the measure you get back. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Well, here we are continuing in this passage, and I will have to admit to you that this is probably the most comforting and the most challenging of all of the passages that I covered during the course of the 3 years. And I have to admit the fact that it is the seventh Sunday after the Epiphany, and that doesn't roll around very often. I give thanks for that. I would like for it to be around for part of it, because, as I say, part of it is very comforting to me. But the reality of the passage is one that is that's challenging and is difficult, and it's just it has some very hard stuff that's in it. So, and it boils down to it's one phrase that Jesus has when he's talking to his disciples after he has called them, and I think that he is kind of chatting with them and letting them know what are some of the expectations as they began to move the ministry. I am sure that they're all gathered there, and they're looking and they're hearing this message about the new reign, and they're thinking in themselves about what this is going to mean, not only for themselves, but what is it going to mean for their community. And when we hear this and this opportunity for change and to a people of whom are living in the midst of oppression, just seeing Jesus and the fact that something new and something different, and the belief that the reign of God is coming, that they have a great deal of hope and anticipation. And you can just imagine that, with that as the background of what they're hoping to hear from Jesus, that then they hear these words, and these very challenging words. So let me first say, that the phrase itself is the phrase when Jesus says, "Love your enemies." Now, I'll share with you the reason that that's comforting for me, in particular when I really started to listen to it, and to listen to it from the standpoint of trying to hear all of the things that Jesus was saying and how Jesus was impacting my life, more so than at the point of where I'm just looking at Scripture and trying to find that I'm most comfortable with, or that I can deal with. But when I started listening to all of it, I like the fact that Jesus acknowledged to me that I can have enemies. I like that part of it, that I don't have to go through a life and a place of where I have to get along with everybody, and everybody comes, because you hear that context, you hear, love your neighbors, you gotta love everybody, and all of the people of whom would come around and tell you what you must be like, and how you got to be accepting of folk, and you got to do all of this, got to do all that. I always would go back. Jesus says, "Love your enemies," and that acknowledges that I got enemies. But as I say, it's comforting to know that there will be people of whom I will have disagreements with, and people and particular systems and structures of which I will be opposed to, and see them as being opposed to me, and the concept of having enemies that. For much of my life, when you had enemies, you had to figure out how to attack your enemies and how to deal with them, and ultimately to be able to prevail for them. So the whole notion of the enemies and the retaliation, of which was my mindset, or how do I get even, or how do I overcome them, or ultimately how do I work to eliminate them, in particular when I'm thinking of the systems. So to rest with that part, but then, as I say, then the challenging part is that Jesus says that you got to love them, and that has been a challenge that continues to challenge me from the time that I first wrestled with that until probably even last night. I continue to wrestle with that whole thing of how do you move to that point of loving your enemies. And for me, what that meant, and where the challenge really started for me in listening to it from Jesus' perspective, in particular taking into context of who he was delivering this message to, for those who dared to say that they wanted to be followers of him, is that first I had to go through and understand who my enemies were, and to why they were, and why I considered them my enemies. That became a process of looking at that. And I must admit to you that in going through that process, that ultimately I viewed the enemy as being that person that stood in the way, that kept me from being who I believe God wanted me to be. That as a follower, and one of whom wanted to live a life in accordance to the expectations that I believe God had of me, that the person that kept me from doing that was the person that was my enemy. And that was a move for me, because normally I thought that originally I thought that an enemy was just somebody who was opposed to me, or kept me from getting what it is that I want. But as I evaluated and looked at people of whom I had the differences with, in some cases, and there were some people of whom I stood in opposition to me, that they themselves were more aligned with what Jesus wanted than where I was. And I had to realize that not all of my enemies, and I would challenge you to even look at your own, is that not all of your enemies are really your enemies. In some cases you are more their enemies than they are your enemies. And so once I began to go through that process and began to evaluate that how it was that was keeping me from honoring, my relationship with Jesus and what Jesus wanted me to do, then I had to find a way to be corrective in that, and to moving them from the place of where I considered them enemies of people of whom I thought stood outside of the grace of God, because at that point in my life I did not want my enemies to benefit from anything. I didn't want. I wanted God to have the same enemies that I had, But once I realized that that's not what Jesus is inviting, that Jesus is inviting me to love, then I had to find out what were those barriers that stood in the way for me to loving them. And foundational to that, of moving to that point, is that I had to look at what it meant to forgive. First of all, and then that continuing in the process of forgiveness is that I first had to admit, where the wrongs were and where things went off. And in some cases, the first person that I had to deal with, I had to forgiving myself for allowing my relationship with another person to affect what would be my relationship with Jesus and my walk with Jesus. And so I had to forgive myself for allowing somebody else to have that kind of power over me to define my actions such that I knew that I was not in accordance to what Jesus wanted. And it's kind of all of those. I kind of remembered that. With that, I had to, with some people, as soon as I was in the presence of some people, I had to view that Jesus was standing, right there beside me, that Jesus was, in the midst of that conversation, kind of like, when I was a child. I don't ever remember doing anything bad in the presence of my parents. But as soon as they turn their backs, or as soon as they, particularly on a Sunday, the moment they say, okay, well, you can sit in the back, but, don't get in trouble. That was the Sunday I was going to get in trouble because I viewed that I was somehow outside of their sight. And if I wasn't going to be seen, I wasn't going to be caught. But inevitably, something would happen. And so, I invited, Jesus in the presence, when I'm in the presence of folk, and envision, that Jesus is looking at my actions, and I want my actions to be pleasing for Him in that moment. The other thing that about forgiveness and the process of forgiveness is that I had to come to the realization that it was not something that was spontaneous, that it just wasn't going to happen very quickly, that oftentimes it meant that I had to work through some stuff. And part of working through the stuff had to admit the pain that of having an enemy does to us. I mean, when there are people who keep us from being who we are, there is some pain that comes with that. There is, not only, the anger, but it causes a break, and you have to work through that, and you have to acknowledge that. You just can't simply say, okay, I'm going to forgive, and move on, because oftentimes, the conflict that comes out of dealing with people of whom you consider your enemies, there is deep-seated pain, and there's a break, and there are wounds that just do not immediately heal. I was looking at my hand earlier today, and I was remembering it was a little over a year ago that I burned it, and you can still see where it was, that the scars are still there, and the remembrance of the stupid thing that I did was there, and so it is with your enemies and the people of whom who hurt you and create that pain. There, I put on Facebook today. I was looking at that while I was waiting to pick up Mason, and there was some pictures that came by, and it immediately brought up some things, and I said, there's always something to to remind you. And so I had to realize that in working through it, that you just don't say, okay, well, it's easy, okay, I forgive it, and just move on. But you have to work through the pain, and you have to acknowledge it, and you have to deal with the process of healing. But not only is it is a process, and you have to go through the healing, and you have to acknowledge how it has happened. But you also have to realize that you just don't get through it by yourself. That there has to be some accountability, and there has to be some actions that ultimately responds to the place that what you're doing. It is so easy just to say, okay, I forgive you, I love you, and then I'll go on about my business. But love is not just something that you can just simply just state. And there has to be some actions, there has to be some change, there has to be some transformation that occurs and takes place in your life. And so when I hear this passage and I read this passage and I think of that, I think of, both the challenge that comes with that and the forgiveness that I think that is ultimately necessary for that to happen. In this passage and probably on Sunday, I'll spend a little bit more time in just going through, because then Jesus just, not only does he says love, he just comes up with some very radical stuff that is just hard, and if you'll just imagine, when I'm listening to this, at a time of where it really indicts me and challenges me, he just offers some stuff that it just did not make sense to me. That when, he says that, those that hurt you, hate you, then you are supposed to bless them. The ones that curse you and abuse you, and those are the ones you're supposed to really care for. He goes on and he says, if someone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other one. And for somebody who takes your coat, then, give them your shirt. And for those who beg for you and take your goods, then, just, let it go with that. And those hard things, somebody hits me, then, I'm going to try to figure out, how to get back with them. But in this radical notion of going through, that as I began to look at it, that, for me, when I first heard it, I'm thinking, oh man, that's very passive in that, and some other phrases that I, can't use at this point in time. But as I began to see, I began to realize the enormous strength that it takes of when someone abuses you, that you do not stoop to their level, but you continuously are reminded of what Jesus expects from you. That whole notion of turning the other cheek. I mean, and we have to hear that in the context of what happens. That you slap somebody, that was a way of insulting somebody. It was ultimately, the masters that slapped the slaves and to put the slaves in their place. And it was to embarrass them in front of others and to completely be disrespectful, but just imagine in that time, for one, to, being slapped, just to turn the other one, and to say, you may have done that, but that's not who I am. You do not define who I am in that moment, and it was against the law for them to slap you back again. I mean, after you put somebody in their place, and for them just to stand there, so you can imagine the kind of strength, and then. For someone to, to take your coat, I mean, that ultimately, that was about as low down as as you could get was to take a person's, because, in the reference that, Jesus is probably speaking of, a person has probably lost everything, and probably in the midst of that time, you can think of it. All of their property has been taken, and no job, none of those things, and the only thing that they would have had to have protect them from the element that would have been their place for sleeping. It would have been their bedroll. It would have been their shelter in the time of a storm. To take that would be the ultimate of just taking everything. And for you to say to somebody, if you that low down, here, just take my shirt, and it would have been more embarrassing for the people around them to say, man, that's just, man, give that man his coat back, And so we have to listen to this story in the context. And as I say, but ultimately it was this, to say to people in that moment that, do not let your aggressor, do not let those of whom you are your enemies in whatever the ways that they come at you to keep you from being the person of whom God has called you to be. Now, as I say, we often look at this story from the standpoint of those who have been oppressed. But I think it's also a word to those of whom find themselves in positions of comfort. If we go back to last week, in that of where he did the blessed to the people who were poor, and then the woes to the people who were rich. But it also is a message to the others that it invites them that even though you may have the advantage, even though you may be in a position, that's not the way. That just because they're your enemy and you can continue to keep them down does not mean that that's what you're supposed to do. Once again, we're with this message that's on the plane is a radical redefining of what it means for us to be in community with one another, at a point of where, as Jesus goes on in this message, that if we can get to the point, and that ultimately what Jesus is inviting them and inviting us to do is to live into a world where we do unto others as that we would have them do unto ourselves. And so that's where we're going. It's some hard stuff for us to be able to deal with. But in light of all of the things that are going on in our world today, and in particular when we think of countries that want to invade other countries, and when we are considering a division that is taking place even within our own country around certain things, it's just time for us to stop. And for us to spend more time on trying to figure out how it is that we love those of whom we stand in opposition to, as opposed to trying to figure out how we retaliate and eliminate. Amen. Well, Mr. Dixon, how things going with you?
Things are going pretty good, man. Yeah. No complaints.
Well, I got a couple of things that I want to talk about. First of all, your impression of the Super Bowl.
Yeah. I mean, it was a good game. Yeah. I watched the entire thing. I think it was as good as it could have been. I don't think that they could have did anything in terms of making the game be any better than it was. And so I was happy with the Super Bowl.
You were happy with the Super Bowl. How were you with the halftime?
I mean, that's the music I grew up on.
Okay.
So, I mean, I am a hip-hop fan. Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, I kind of like on the playlist or the track list of my life.
Yeah, all right.
All of those.
So they resonated with you.
Oh, yeah. I'm very familiar.
I am sure that since it was track of your life, I am sure that I heard some of them. There were some of them that that I could have remember having heard before. But I think the thing I probably was most impressed with was just the production of it. I thought it was kind of, I thought the look was good. The fact that they kept it clean. I like that part, and the dancers and all of it. So so I enjoyed it. But and I think that probably the team that was probably the best team probably won. So when you don't have as they used to say, when you don't have a dog in that, that you just wanted to end up being a good game. And I think from that standpoint, it probably kept the interest of the people. So anything else you want to say about that?
Oh, man, now we have to figure out what we're going to do until next football season.
Yeah, well, if things are like they were the week before and this week, I am sure we'll have 6 months of is Brady gonna still stay retired? Is Brady gonna really come back? Is he gonna go here? And we'll probably listen, particularly here, in Nashville, is Aaron Rodgers gonna come here? So we'll be listening to all of.
I don't think Tom Brady's coming back, bro.
Yeah,
I don't. I think if Tom Brady, right, is a guy that strikes me as, he might be impulsive. Right, but I also think that he's calculated. So this isn't something that he's done on a whim, like, I'm just going to retire and then I'm going to come back. It would have to be the right situation where it's like he can plug in and they can win a Super Bowl. And I don't know any place that he can do that and be, in a position to be an MVP, a Super Bowl champion. It's like I don't see that is in the cards for him.
Well, as I told someone, I said, if you want to see, just watch him for the next month or so. If he's not going because he's 44, almost 45, he can't take 2 or 3 months off and then expect to come back. He has got to, he's got to be training and he's got to doing everything because, you sit out for 6 months and you're not taking them hits and you're not doing that kind of stuff and then just try to come back. I agree with you. I just don't see him coming back. So we'll see whether he goes and works out on that. Well, I said I had 2 things, but really I have 3 things because now I want to go because in bringing that up. What do you think about the Harding and the Simmons trade for each other?
Well, I mean, we'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, the writing is on the wall, so I mean, there's nothing to it but to really assess their performance and see how they play together. I think basketball, I've never played any other organized sport besides basketball. And I know that it's really based on the chemistry of the 5 men that are on the court at one particular time. So that doesn't mean the starting 5. That doesn't mean, the 5 that come off the bench. But everybody has to be in this together and gel.
Yeah.
So, and that takes, repetition. That takes practice. That takes, a lot of different things for it to come, full circle. So I don't know. I'm not going to, because I was listening to something today, I'm not going to give James Harden and Joel Embiid the benefit of the doubt, because if you look at it, what James Harden has had in his, in his career in terms of people to play with, I mean, he's pretty much had the gambit of players, right? So it's like, I don't know. Now, in terms of Ben Simmons, it's like I'm not sold on him either.
Right.
He's gonna have to show me that he is that player. He is a player that can be depended on in clutch moments. Not when it's the first quarter and everybody's just kind of going through the motions. But you're talking about game 4, and game's tied, and you need a big shot. You need a big play. I don't know. I don't think Ben Simmons is going to be that player until he has more repetition and more experience under his belt.
Well, I thought about both of those circumstances in light of the message that I'm working on, with for Sunday, is that in each one of the cases, whether it's in football, whether some people say, Tom Brady, don't want to work with Bruce Arians anymore, and Aaron Rodgers don't want to work with the Packers anymore. And, of course, you look on the other side, Harden just quit. Every time he doesn't want to play with a team, and he quits. Houston, he got fat, and then he just, got his hand hurt. And, and, of course, we know with Ben Simmons, he hadn't played all this year because he didn't like what Doc Rivers had, and Joel Embiid. They have all of these differences. And, and when you're listening to, when I was listening to this, and they create enemies within the context. And like you say, if you don't have the chemistry and you aren't working together, then it's hard to be successful. But then I think about, talking about, part of your history, the theme music of your growing up. I also think about your Laker team, and it was
my Laker team.
Yeah, but
I'm not a Lakers fan.
Well, I'm. Yes, you were.
No, I'm not. No, I've never been a Lakers fan. I've been a fan of Kobe Bryant.
Okay, well,
and Shaquille O'Neal.
Right, so that was what I was. That's what I. Okay. I go along with that.
Don't lump me in that.
Okay, because I'm a player. I'm not a team person. Right. But my reference was to the Lakers and to Kobe and Shaq. I mean, they did not like one another. Right. But they worked together because they had something that both of them wanted to have, Right. And I couldn't envision either one of them, doing, of having a Kyrie Irving saying, well, I'm just going to play half the game, and the half of the games I'm going to play, I'm going to take off for the other half just to give myself, a mental break. I just couldn't see them embracing that kind of atmosphere that at some point you have to realize what are the things that are important and how is it that you work together in a mutual kind of respect. They didn't like one another, but I think they did respect one another for for what they both brought and how they both contributed to one another.
Well, you know what? I've seen a couple of interviews with Shaquille O'Neal, after Kobe Bryant's death, kind of explaining some of the things. And I think there was an interview that they did maybe 2 years after Kobe retired, where Shaq was saying that, him and Kobe didn't have a problem, right? And some of the issues that they had, were on the basketball court. And because they understood, Shaq understood how to play the media and how to use that to fuel Kobe Bryant more so than anything. Mm-hmm. Right, to have all of those whispers and all of those people say things about, it should be Shaq's team. And so Shaq played into that allowed Kobe to fuel himself and to become that alpha dog. So behind closed doors, Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal were, not the best of buddies, but it wasn't as the media portrayed it to be. Yeah. Shaq took the initiative and led Kobe in there and said, no, let's let them play that out so that they think we're beefing. They going to come in and think that, we're not that cohesive group, and then we're going to knock them in the mouth. Right. We're just going to keep hitting them in the mouth. And so, when you use that illustration, it's like, yes, that may be one of the best examples of, two alpha males being able to coexist and make it work. Now, it didn't, pan out for both of their careers, but, Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal, you couldn't argue a better duo that played together besides Kobe and Shaq, and I'll be here for that.
Well, and where I am, and I would have to say, I do not know of a place of where there was a Batman and Robin, the whole kind of thing, and particularly in that particular case, because on any given night, either one of them could have been Batman and the other one could have been Robin, right. But it was a thing. Last thing I want to touch bases on with you, and it's also back to looking at the message, is that last week, Chief Drake, the head of the police department here in metropolitan Nashville, made a decision. They're going to put a detail that was going to be monitoring from 440 to the Rutherford County line on 24. All of the aggressive driving and the road rage that is just taking place, and when you look in the news, they're just and since they've been doing it, I mean, they've been stopping, somewhere in the neighborhood around 45. They've been making like 120 something stops a day, but about 45 of them have been for what they call very aggressive drivers for people coming in. And while we don't have, the explanations, and, I guess it's been evaluated from that standpoint, but it does. I mean, every so often, at 4, it's 5 o'clock in the morning, and I mean, there are people getting on Briley Parkway, doing 65 miles, 70 miles an hour, passing. I'm like, where in the hell are these folk? This, aggressive. I mean, and they driving like, they in the Daytona 500 that's on this weekend, and I just don't know. Now, there's some people that, as I was listening to a story earlier, there's some people just saying, well, people have just been pent up and they had to work from home and they're just out and they're just, but to have that kind of just road rage and just drive, I just see people driving in traffic just like, it's a stock car, and they just got to hurry up and get in. The person that's in that lane, and they're blowing and flashing lights. And as I say, last week, to have 3 incidents where people just started shooting at another car, just simply because somebody wouldn't get out the way. And so I'm just, what's your thoughts on that?
On aggressive driving, or on the detail, or which part?
All aspects. I mean, the detail was a response. I mean, and is that something that you have noticed? Is that something that?
Yeah. I think as I've gotten older, right, my driving habits and my driving pattern has changed. And it also depends on what I'm driving. If I'm in my truck, I'm going to be cruising, If I'm in my car, it might be a different story. Yeah. I might be giving it a little gas on Briley Parkway. And then, I don't consider myself to be an aggressive driver. But I think it's important for drivers to really be conscious of how they are endangering other people by their driving habits, right? You might think, I'm a great driver, I do this all the time, but it's just going to take that one time for that one person to swerve in your way, right? And boom. Just the other day, man, I was coming down, Old Hickory by Madison School in the morning, and I'm driving in my car. And all of a sudden, this little Honda Jeep I'm 3/4, on the right hand side of them.
Right.
They still have a little lead on me, but they could look out my window, out there, passenger side window, and see my car.
Yeah.
And they just merged on over on me. So I had to slam on brakes and go to the curb and curb my rims and all of that stuff. And I think that person just wasn't paying attention.
Yeah.
They had no idea. They just really weren't aware of what was around them. And I think, if you driving fast and you hitting that gas and somebody's not paying attention, and it's like you going 100 miles an hour and then they just get over in that lane, it's like by the time you slow down, you own them.
Yeah,
There's nothing you can do. So,
well, other morning, that happened. That happened to me. I was on Briley Parkway in this particular case, and the guy just zoomed past me, and it was another car, and so he had to cut back in to try to get, because he was going on the car that was in front of him, because that car wasn't moving, but he wanted to get around me. And boy, when he went around me, when he started over there, I said, "Oh, it's gonna be something," because I knew it's some serious potholes right there. Hit that pothole, he spun and went out. Now he didn't crash, but guess what? The right two tires, both the front and the back, blew out.
Yeah.
And he's on the side now. He was just fortunate enough, and I'm in the van, so I'm driving slow enough. But if I had been driving 65 miles an hour, when he hit those bumps, it'd have been no way I could have avoided him.
Mm-hmm.
I would have hit him, and I'm like, where could he have been going that he wanted to go that early? I may understand it if it had been at 7:58 and he got to be at work at 8 o'clock. But I'm just the mere notion of that. And so, and it was almost like he just made my vehicle, the vehicle in front of him, his enemies, and he just had to have things his particular way. And then, and it ends up, and I'm sure, now he's got, he had to get two tires on the blowout. He's never gonna get any money from the state if he tries to go that route. And I am sure that he felt like it was the other car's fault and it was my fault that he had to do all that, because the car, I should have been going faster. The other car should have gotten out the way, and it was somebody else's fault. But this whole thing, and when I think of the people of whom, last week it was just some shootings that were just taking place, where people just shooting out of cars for that. So, all those things are just kind of processing. So, and I knew what had happened with you. So,
I don't know how I would respond. Like, I don't get road rage like that.
Yeah.
I don't. When somebody does something stupid and I'm able to, react in a way that it's not, doesn't put my car in jeopardy like the other morning, it's just like, oh man, this guy can't, or this lady can't drive.
Right, yeah.
Let them go on about their business.
Because
I'm in a frame of mind, like, I'm not going to try to appease you in your driving, right? I'll get over for you, right? If it's feasible for me and safe for me. But I'm not going to drive faster, so just because you on my bumper, I'm not going to do that. So,
All right, okay.
All right.
I want to thank you for tuning in and spending a little time with us. As I say, it means a great deal when we hear from you. I also like to hear your thoughts about, maybe some things that we need to talk about, some things in the context of, where we're moving with the message. So let me know. It means a lot when we hear from you. And as I say, I want to also just kind of encourage you to be in prayer for those people of whom we lifted up, and those who will be, for whom next week will be a rough and challenging time for them, and just ask you to be in prayer. And thank you once again for spending some time with us.